Today, I'm speaking to Martin Patz. Martin is the director of Core Tech and one of the founding engineers for Recogni. And Recogni is a US-German company founded in 2017 that is building state-of-the-art autonomous driving perception technology centered around their novel silicon that is beating competition in terms of latency, power efficiency, and compute density. Martin is one of the coolest guys I know, and it's an absolute pleasure to share an hour with him to discuss his career in artificial intelligence and the journey of him joining Recogni in the early stages to now. I hope you enjoy it, and feedback is always welcome.
Welcome to the AI Game Changers podcast with Luke Whips.
Well, I always love computer, especially computer games. So I picked electrical engineering as my studies because I felt that could fit, and there was no entry barrier, so that's easy. Cool. Let's go. Very early on, actually, I think even before the studies, I felt like it would be so cool if we could simulate, like if we could have enough compute to compute something like is happening in the brain or must be happening, because I didn't know what's exactly happening. But imagine, like, it would be so cool to have so much compute to really replicate what is happening there. So that was a very strong motivation from the beginning, but I really didn't follow through with this. But it was always in my mind. And then studies went on, and I got towards the end of, like, in the masters, I took courses in neuromorphic and neural-inspired technology, so chips that are neuromorphic, or software that tries to replicate the behavior of the brain of neurons. And that really motivated me to get deeper into this field. And one of the papers I read there in a paper kind of comparison study was about using neural networks, but not the final thing that they produce, like this is a cat or a dog, but just use the output before that. It's just an array of numbers, and the numbers doesn't mean anything to us. But the paper was arguing that the combination of those numbers is a very unique description of what the input was. So I felt, cool. So the machines understand things in different ways than we do. And that's really, maybe that's powerful. And then after that, I became a working student at Navis, where they want to find people in a building. Right? So they ask the person to take a picture of where they are. And if you would show that picture to a person that knows the building, the person will, in their mind, compare, I've seen that, frame on the wall, or I know that corridor, that sixth floor, left wing, But we can't do this with GPS because GPS is really bad in height prediction, and it doesn't work inside buildings. So the idea of Navis navigation team is to predict the position of the person based on that image. And they were doing that with supervised training that was trying to predict, X and Y position of the person and Z. But that didn't work out at all. And I thought, okay, maybe we can use this, generic representation of the image, because the network knows what is unique about that image. And that worked extremely well. And that was my entry to deep learning. So I read this paper, I applied it to a different field. It worked out really well. What didn't work out really well was training network, so I really sucked at that. But this was my entry to understanding the potential of deep learning and how it can be applied. And so, that was kind of the end of studies. Transition into working student, doing my master thesis, attended the Center for Digital Technology and Management, CDTM, in Munich, which is, I think, the coolest organizational institution out there right now. At least for the German ecosystem. That is end of studies.
Martin, just for I don't think the lag is actually that bad now, is it? It's actually not too bad.
It's really good. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. All this will be edited out, Martin, so don't worry about this. But just for the people that don't know CDTM, can you? I mean, probably most people will, but can you just give a description of what CDTM is and why you joined? Just for the people who don't know what that is.
Okay, so the CDTM, so the Center for Digital Technology Management, is a joint institution of the Technical University of Munich, the TUM, and the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, LMU. And they both have this shared chair, and essentially it tries to bring students from as diverse disciplines as possible together and work on something in a very intense fashion. That's how I understand it. So interdisciplinarity and high challenge and high intensity, I think, are kind of the key ingredients that shape the outcome. And you go through courses. It's 3 courses. There you can read that up in detail on their website. But essentially, you think about how to analyze trends and markets and drivers that move the world. So kind of to understand what is the big impacts that really shape the future, which really helped me a lot about thinking about the world. And then you develop products, a prototype, for one case that you really like, usually with an industry collaboration. So and the expectation to make that a real product is very high. That's not a toy example that they built. And there's been many companies that came out of that. Actually, Egypt, I think, came out of that. Stylite.
Don't mind.
Yeah, a couple more. And then last thing is they do a kind of consultant style workshop. And in general, the cool thing is you come together with extremely talented, extremely ambitious people with extremely diverse backgrounds, and usually they are extremely humble and humble. I think that's the most important thing. That's a great combination. Like people that want to listen and want to learn, that have a growth mindset, kind of they by default assume they might be wrong. That's just a very fertile ground to think about problems in different ways and just to grow. And finally, and that's maybe for career advice, very helpful. The network of this education platform is insanely powerful. Because so many successful companies came out of that already, and just in general, people are very eager to help. It's just a networking platform as well.
Well, that was going to be my point on top of CDTM. You see so many people come out of, I can't remember what the other one is. I think it's Managing More. I think that's the competitor for like CDTM, right? But you see so many people come out of CDTM and go on to be really successful afterwards. It seems like a bit of a melting pot of kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And what I would say to people is it tends to, or from what I see anyway, it tends to add on another layer to your academic experience in terms of like knowing how to apply it and where to apply it. Because I think, I don't know if you agree with this, but most people that I speak to who come straight out of university and they've only worked on kind of academic projects, they know how to, they're quite bound by like their academic mindset. But I think organizations like CDTM, for example, or Managing More, they give you just that, they give you the bridge. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I fully agree. And also, I think historically, the German economy is characterized by a lack of, in the wide masses, by a lack of entrepreneurship. That's, I think, what differentiates us, sadly, mostly from the Anglo-Saxon working economy, is that Anglo-Saxons are just more entrepreneurial. This is, I don't know, somewhat more part of the culture. And so CDTM can be a way to really learn that, because it's a skill also. To think about not only, let's say, technical feasibilities or, the implications of finance ideas, but also how can that translate into things that move the people, which is the market and products, right? And you mentioned Managing More. I think you said competitor, but maybe it's also a complementary platform. I think CDTM really focus on entrepreneurship and Managing More on managerial skills. So the individual, I think they produce a great people for management. And I think that's maybe if I would have to decide if I want to become a manager, I would go to Managing More. If I want to be a founder, I think CDTM.
Did you ever think about founding your own startup after your CDTM days, or what happened after you finished there?
You have a lot of pressure, honestly, not explicitly, but everyone is founding companies around you, and So obviously I kind of had to think about it, but I also thought about it because I really want to found my own company. And I decided, so this was a very conscious decision to not found a company. I had the option to do that with various people, but I said, or my thesis was, as soon as I found something, I will need to acknowledge that scaling my impact does not go through my work, but by helping others. And a necessary result of that is that you work less on actual things and work more with people. And a consequence of that, and this was my thesis, is I will not become better technically. And I fear that this is a one-way road. I fear that once you are a managerial type, you will not go back to technical stuff. You can only shift the slider one way. You cannot shift it back. So that's why I made this a very conscious and decision to not found a company, but rather join a company where I would be very likely responsible for a key of the technical challenges, or a big part, where at least could think of 3 to 4 years I'll spend on technical challenges to become much better, and really be able to have real life challenges to grow within them. So yeah, that's essentially what brought me to Recogni. That was the perfect opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, dude, let's kind of dive into that, because you were one of the founding engineers of Recogni, right? So was you the first engineering hire in Munich? Is that right?
Yeah. So there were 5 founders and 2 engineers, 2 engineers in the US office, Shaba and Berend, and that was the first one here. So third engineer.
How was that? Did you feel immense amount of pressure joining in the early stages, especially with, because if you look at Berend and Shaba's backgrounds, right, they're obviously ultra experienced. So do you remember how it felt being one of the first original engineers in that kind of environment where you're surrounded by people that are quite a fair bit senior, right?
Yeah. That's a good question. I need to think back. So, I knew I was technically by far not as skilled as them, for sure. But sadly, I have a notorious lack of respect for, let's say, obvious authorities. And I always try to treat them on eye level. So I did not think of myself as not, fitting there. I knew I was not there where they are, but I felt I could get there, after some time. And it was extremely exciting because a lot of things were undefined, unclear. We're, started figuring out our way. Back then, the business plan was different. We were targeting to go into a surveillance market, not into the automotive market. And that was exciting.
Here you are today. It's so how if you kind of think back to that moment, then how did you make sure that process and that opportunity didn't become overwhelming? Because if you've just finished your masters, I know you've done the thing at CDTM, right, which gives you a little bit more of the kind of entrepreneurial mindset, a couple on top. But that was your first role in industry, and you've joined an extremely early stage startup working on highly complex topics. There's going to be a huge element of being able to, or having to have autonomy over your work and work stuff out for yourself and upskill and kind of get shit done, right? So how did you, I know we're thinking back 4 years now, man, so it's probably a distant memory, but do you remember how you kind of sat down and thought, right, this is how I'm going to approach this? Because that could easily become quite an overwhelming situation for a lot of people. So do you remember how you kind of segmented that process, I guess, in your mind, so it didn't become overwhelming? Or did you kind of just get on with it?
So back then, our management was very much focused on fundraising, and they were for about a year. So the technical guidance was not strong, and we were focused on building proofs of concept, POCs, and that was the only kind of technical directive. This is what we want to build. And I think in these early days, actually, some of the core genes or essences of what Recogni is today was shaped, which is that engineering decisions are made at the base, are made by the engineers. And that was back then a necessity, because no one told me to build X. I just felt to go to Y, I need to build X. And, building a lot of stuff was a great opportunity to learn and make mistakes, and we made a lot of mistakes. Like, that's very clear, right? But we knew that we will need to take time to clean this up later, and that this is also part of the process. So I think this was really maybe if I would summarize this in one sentence, it would be, if you think you need to do something to achieve your goal, do that, and not always wait for management or people above you to tell you. It is your responsibility to tell them what needs to be done as well. It's not a one-way path. Leadership or an organization is not a tree that goes down. And I want to say this because some of the people that joined us since then felt that this is how an organization should be, that all the directives should come from above. And I do not think so. Right? I think it's also the responsibility of the, let's say, grunt work engineers, which I still today consider myself as one of them, at least partially. I need to tell kind of the management of my managerial head, I need to build this, but also my peers and so on. So there must be a very strong push upwards as well.
It's that's not, I mean, I completely agree with you, because people on the ground in the weeds of whatever industry are going to know much more than the executives sitting at the top that have got a top-down view on problems, right? But I don't feel like that's a common theme within most organizations, generally speaking. I think it's probably the reverse, right? So you get the CTO head of, right, this is what we're building, this is how we're going to do it, off you go, right? But I guess the good thing with that, and what I've always loved about Recogni, is that autonomous, with pun not intended, but like the autonomy piece for you guys internally, people, it's a shit pun, right? I'm sorry. But, having the ability to be fully autonomous in the business and be able to work on things that you think you should work on, and drive that drive the narrative about what we should be doing and when. I don't think many organizations out there offer that. I really don't. So I think you guys are very unique in that regard. Yeah.
Well, I think, so I agree with the observation, first of all, and I don't know how this will be for bigger organizations, let's say 100 people and above, but fundamentally I believe in the following truth, and that is, to be as successful as possible, you should, as a company, build something that satisfies the needs of the customers or the needs of a market. Like I think famously Ford said, if people had asked me what they want, they'd said faster horses, but we built cars, right? So it is not about understanding or not listening to customers what they say they want, but understanding what they need. And I think this is the biggest challenge of an organization, how to kind of connect a way how it is expressed what is needed. And that is not what people say they want. That's a different thing, right? What I need and what I want is different things. Can be. So connect the things that are needed to the place where they can be done, connecting this and not losing anything in between, that is the biggest challenge. And the more people you have in between, the more likelihood of loss you have, right? That's, I don't know how in English you call this game, where everyone is standing in the line and you just tell the person in front of you something, you whisper, and then in the end something.
Shit, I can't even remember what that's called. It's not Chinese whispers, is it? No, it's not that. Yeah, I can't remember.
So we call this,
I know the
we
game
call
you're
this the
talking about,
pose of whispering. But you know the game, right? And the same game happens essentially in companies with hermetically separated teams with long hierarchies, and especially in companies where information flows one way, right? So those organizations, and that's my intuition, will naturally have a hard time at building a good product because they lose so much of the intended need on the way to where it's executed. So now bringing that back to us, I always try to communicate what I understand that is needed, and actually also bring the engineers close to the people that express what they want, right? Which is not what they need necessarily, but really let our engineers listen to what they have to say. And then we can go back and think, what is it what they need? Iterate with them until they also understand if what they ask for is what they need, and then go execute, right? So I believe in communicating the goal, and the goal is deliver what they need down the way, and then let people decide what we need to do to get there. Yeah, so that's essentially the philosophy I think, that we try to follow.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's a good philosophy, right? Because I think that's the feedback that I've had from most people that I know that work at Recogni, having those sort of really close touch points with customers and really understanding the pain that you're trying to solve, right? And I think, again, I think a lot, I'm probably going to get slaughtered for saying this, to be honest, but I think a lot of organizations, engineers are kind of like how can I explain it? They're kind of like a resource. I don't know how to explain this very well, but they're kind of just a unit in the business that is kind of, I don't really know how to explain it, but I don't think a lot of people really get the autonomy and ownership over, like real autonomy and real ownership over like solving problems that they could do in a company like Recogni, right? I'm not saying you guys are the only people out there that run an organization like that, but what I typically see for most people that are looking to move on from their current company is a combination of a couple of things. But one of the things that usually comes up is not having real autonomy over the work that they do, or not being able to choose what they engineer. And they're just I don't know if this is the German, this translates to Germany, but like a dog's body. So like you're just told what to do. You're just a code monkey, right? So you build this. Thanks very much. Whereas it seems like you guys are on a completely different scale to that. So, but yeah, I mean, we've got a bit off tangent, but
yeah. I want to mention one other thing also, that we talked about earlier that Shaba and Bernd are much more senior than I am, and I was, and I probably still am, and because I'm aware of that, I also made it kind of part of our engineering culture that that position should never dictate a decision or be drive a decision. So we made it a culture to have a respectful but honest, idea challenging, conversation culture. No, that was double culture. But to make it okay to challenge others' ideas, do that respectfully, and I think this led to like a very collaborative environment. And maybe that's so. So when I worked at Navis, I've never felt I had anyone to bounce my ideas with. Actually, only Hamza. Hamza as well. He was the only guy I could really talk to. I wished always to have a company where I can have someone like Hamza to bounce my ideas with. And then now, looking back over those years, multiple people that had just recently joined Recogni told me, man, it's so cool that I can, ideate with someone together on an idea. And we have that very frequently today, that two people in the same room or just come together, stand on a whiteboard, how it's, maybe even, what is the word? Damn it. Yeah, lots of words. How people think about this with love. No, in a idealistic fashion. We have that actually. That's what I'm trying to say. So people really stand on whiteboards and discuss ideas. And they do that maybe for 3 hours, but then they only sit down 10 minutes and implement it. And that's good. This is something that I think...
It must be quite difficult to find the balance between the challenging... collaborative environment, especially when you've got a bunch of really great guys who are super intelligent and they all this kind of leans back onto what you were saying earlier about having the mindset of you're probably wrong first, but it's probably quite difficult, or maybe you could explain to us now, creating a culture whereby you leave your ego to one side and your solution and your ideas can get directly challenged in a non-threatening and a non-attacking kind of way. That's a very difficult balance to get right? Because there are some organizations out there. I've worked for some in what I do in recruitment where, you get slammed, right? If you're slightly off piste or, you've said something that maybe someone doesn't agree with. So it must be quite difficult to find the balance between people saying the right things and putting together, the right solution and putting together smart ideas, but then also not challenging someone's ego and not attacking people directly, right? Do you feel like that kind of developed over time, or was that an active thing that you guys tried to build?
So certainly, I think you need a certain character to be able to work in such an environment. I'm not going to lie. That doesn't work for everyone. If you're a person that gets offended if someone criticizes any of your work even, right? Not even your personality. It's understandable if people challenge your personality that you get offended. But even if people challenge your work, that you get offended, that would never fly with us. You would have a very hard time, not going to work. But not everyone is like this, at least not in the degree that it works best in such an organization. So I'm pretty sure that people developed from where they were personality-wise, when they joined to where they are today. So in recruitment, when we interview people, we really pay attention to, is that person open about their own mistakes? Is it even eager to learn? Right? We had one applicant who was super eager to learn, and we rejected him on the first try. But they told him, you're really good, become better in this and this and this, and we'll hire you. And we hired him now in the second trial. I think you need to have a personality foundation to be able to work with this. And then, or the rest, I'm not exactly sure. So, if leadership plays a role in that, then I hope to contribute my part by really being brutally open and direct. I admit a lot of my mistakes very proactively. Even I write in Slack, in our communication platform, I messed this up. So that really as many people as possible can see that I admit mistakes. I hope that helps. And what else? Yeah, and we did a few workshops on just how to communicate, right? Feedback culture. How do I phrase something that, because you can say one thing in many ways, but only a few of those ways will actually, you don't need to bump into, you need to tickle the defensive modes of the others unnecessarily, right? To get that across what you have to say. But
that's a nice way to put it, Martin. That's a really nice way.
So we did that, and I think that helped as well. But generally, that is very exhausting, right? To always think about how to say things. So by the time that people get to know each other, they can just say it frankly, even if that would sound offensive to another person. After some time, people know each other, and they know what all the emotions that are behind those words. They know that, and then it's kind of an agreement that you form over time, and then you don't need proper feedback culture anymore, in my opinion. But in the beginning, it's really helpful.
Do you think new people coming into the business might find that quite scary, though?
Well, probably, yeah.
Because they're not going to know that, right? Because if there's like a time agreement thing that's kind of unspoken, I mean, new people coming into the company, I'm just trying to think empathetically towards like how I might feel. They might think, fuck, I would never talk to someone like that, right? But then I guess, if they've gone through that interview process with you guys and they've been vetted in terms of their mindset about delivering or, receiving feedback on, things that they don't know or that they could have done better and stuff like that. Maybe not. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, that for sure. And you're right. This is critical, right? When we do onboarding, we try to, so during the onboarding process, right? The first day they join, the first week, that's where we do onboarding. We talk about this. Actually, we tell them we want to have open a discussion culture around technical and also personal aspects, like the way you work, but also the work you produce. And they do see that in, when they just look around. If they see other people discussing an idea, they might think that they hate each other, but they will realize that they do respect each other very much. And then I guess they naturally, it's like a herd, right? You always adapt. If you're one and the others are all the same, you adapt to them usually, or you leave. But usually you just adapt. And I fundamentally, I believe this is what people want. That people want to speak freely, right? People want to feel respected. So I believe we do both. So I would assume everyone would naturally eventually converge to that.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think no one wants to work in an organization where you tread on glass or you tiptoe around your real thoughts and feelings about stuff, right? And I think working with you guys over the past 2 years, like I really feel that as well. Even with the feedback and working directly with you, like on positions and stuff like that, it's honestly been one of the kind of highlights of my entire recruitment career. I'd say probably the highlight, to be honest. So I really think that you guys have got something.
Man, that's an honor that you say that.
So, but yeah, man. Honestly, I truly believe it. Yeah, I think we're kind of touching on a couple of points about what you think makes a good X or a good Y, right? So, I mean, if we kind of just strip it back to like just a really straightforward question. What makes the difference between a great engineer and a good engineer from where you're sitting? What do you think?
Okay, I really like to use a physics analogy for that. But there has only been a single person that really understood it, so I'll not use it.
I certainly won't.
Okay, I'll use a different analogy, okay? So think about a barrel, okay? The barrel is full. There's a volume inside the barrel, and you can fill it with water. And in the beginning, there's some water in. And the water represents the knowledge you have, the abilities you have. So you have some water in there. And what I do think that an engineer is not characterized by is how much water is in his barrel. Bucket, right? I do not care about this very much. What I care about much more is that engineer able to put in a lot of water? Like, with which speed can that person put in water? Now, the physics analogy would be the first derivative, so the change. And then even more, the second derivative. So how much is that engineer able to improve the speed at which that engineer is putting water in? With the water example, maybe in the beginning he uses his hands, and then he sees a guy with a bucket, and they think, oh wow, that guy says the bucket is really bigger than my hands, I use it. Then he starts putting in water with a bucket, and then he sees, I don't know, someone filling gasoline in a car, and there's a pump, and he thinks like, wow, there is a pump, I use a pump. So, and what is next? I don't know what's next. So that, think always continuously improving. I think this is one of the most important traits. And why is that So I don't think I would have thought that way 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, I didn't think about these things 10 or 15 years ago, but I don't think I would have, because back then change was slower, and change is really high right now, and things are changing faster, right? So the third derivative of where we are today is also high. Our society, our technical progress changes much faster. So I think when back then, maybe it took you 5 years, your knowledge to get irrelevant, or 10, today, maybe we sit at 1 or 2 years, and soon it will be maybe half a year. So if you're not able to, learn the new stuff within half a year, you're outdated. Your knowledge. And it's not about the new generations that come. It's about also the other engineers that keep learning, right? You're not, like people said, you're competing against the next generation. No, you're competing against your own generation. That has always been the case. So I think that's really what I'm looking for in someone. Do you have a growth mindset for how you work, for the technology you work on? That is the fundamental driver of success, in my opinion. And all of the other aspects or character traits or behaviors are just a derivative of that. Like, we talked about conversation culture. Can you openly talk with people and discuss your ideas in earnest and with respect? Well, you only do that to become better, right? All of that serves the purpose of becoming better. That is whatever goes, any character trait is evaluated against this goal for me. I hope this answers the question.
No, it does. It really does, man. I think it's probably quite a unique answer to that I don't typically hear, but I completely 100% agree. I read that there's 2,000 new research papers in artificial intelligence released every month, right? And as you say, technology advancements now are just growing exponentially. So I would agree with you. A couple of years ago, if you said, how do I stay current? I'd say, well, if you stand still in this market, you probably fall behind in like a 2-year period. But now, 6 months to 12 months is, that's a long time to not keep up with stuff, right? And I think it's such a moving target challenge for people trying to progress their career now. I guess the next question would be objectively, how does someone do that? Because they obviously have a day job to do, right? And unless you work at a company that moves at the same velocity of advancement as the industry, it's quite difficult to keep up with that, right? If it's not your core focus on a day to day. So how would you, or what advice would you give engineers to kind of stay up to speed? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, it's twofold. I think staying up to speed means, using the barrel equivalent again, keeping your barrel as full as the other barrels. And that obviously is helpful. That will kind of guarantee a success in an interview, right? But I don't think that's necessary, because otherwise my initial statement about I don't care about how full the barrel is would be invalidated. So I don't think it's necessary to stay up to speed with everything that's happening. And it's impossible, probably. But what I think you can stay up to date with is how many things you learn in a day. I would not compromise on that. I would always make every day's challenge to learn something new. And I think this is what really shines through. Because also learning, keeping your barrel as full as the other barrels is probably not as rewarding as improving your fillings strategy on par with the others. And why is that? So technology is diversifying even ever more, right? A specialist back then was called a doctor. Today, a specialist is not, maybe yesterday yesterday a specialist was called an eye doctor. But today and tomorrow we call specialists a nerve in the eye doctor. And in 10 years it will be even crazier, right? So the applicability of the things you know to something that is around you is less and less and less. So it's more about how quickly can I learn the stuff that the other guy knows. In that sense, I would never think it's important to read all the papers. make every day a challenge of learning something. If that means reading papers to understand what they do, cool. Or learning to be a better programmer, or learning to better communicate, anything, right? But just really make every day's challenge a one of growth. I think this is much more rewarding and also generally applicable more.
Sorry, man. I got to, if it's, if that's to become a better programmer, then cool. I got to that part. So it's only been a couple of seconds, so I don't think there was too much after that. But what was the rest?
I think I said if you make every day's challenge a challenge to grow, then that's perfect. And it can be growing in programming. Learn new features of your language, make your code more elegant, adhere more to good design principles of code. Document your code. I don't know. Pick anything that makes a good programmer, or become a better communicator. Talk better with your colleagues. Care about them, or understand technical solutions. Read papers and understand why they are successful, why they got improvements. Learn, understand that. This is what I would rather do. Yeah.
So what you're saying is it's not necessarily about becoming good at any one particular thing, although that is obviously part and parcel of being a great X, right? But what you look for specifically in great engineers, and what you think makes the foundation of a great insert whatever title, is kind of like, it's just the process of learning, right? That never stops. So you never cut the flow of learning, and in your current work you look for opportunities to learn and progress through the process of what you do on a day-to-day, right? So do you see well, I guess the backside of that then is that you must see people that kind of don't do that, and kind of are just stuck in what they do on a day-to-day, and that's kind of it, but they don't look for opportunities to learn and progress, right?
I want to give an example. Why I think this recommendation will be probably the recommendation for the future as well is because, first of all, like I said, experts become more narrow and narrow in the future. So the likelihood that you work in the same field again is lower, right? Because the population stays constant. So, whatever. It is just likely that you not work in the exactly same thing. So you need to be able to have or obtain the skills of the other field. And what I think that people underestimate always, and that's probably a human shortcoming, is exponential growth, right? And someone who continuously learns every day will have exponential growth in their knowledge. And there was one applicant to one of our teams that was applying to a compiler position, right? And then he said, and then I think he was, so I was not part of the interview, but Jessa told me. The guy was asked, do you know anything about neural networks? And he says, no, not much. I know this and this and this and this. And it was so detailed and so correct that Jessa called in one of our AI experts to ask him. And he said, wow, this dude is great. He could have been easily hired for an AI position as well. And that's, I think, the difference that people cannot imagine. That you can really become the expert in multiple fields. Like, let's say, something that's really good in multiple fields by just continuously learning, by just continuously being curious. And I think this is what really this differentiates good engineers from excellent ones. That they don't draw boundaries anymore. That they just, like a sponge, absorb information.
Yeah, there's something, I can't remember the exact, you could probably work this out on the spot right now, Martin, but there's an equation, and I think it was driven by the UK Olympic cycling team, and it was basically the principle of marginal gains, right? So 1% better every day. 1% on its own looks like nothing, right? But then when you extrapolate that out over a 12-month period, it's fucking, can you work that out right now? That would be cool if you could, but it's a lot. But yeah, I believe in that as well, man. I think that, if you look for those small, tiny intricacies of your work that you can make better immediately. Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. But, I think if you can look for those small, tiny intricate parts of your work that you can get better at 1% every day. I think that's where you start to really level up. I see it quite often as well where, people tend to just kind of meander and they don't really, I'm a big believer now that if you really want to craft a career and become one of the best in what you do, you have to do what other people won't do. You have to really push past what you consider to be great. And just do what other people aren't prepared to do, right? And I think if that's continual learning on a day-to-day or really diving into a topic, you need to do that. Because otherwise, and, again, people will probably kill me for saying this, but there are a lot of average people out there, and there are a lot of, okay people. There are fewer great people. But if you look at the difference of what those great people do compared to the people that are average, it's stuff like that, right? So yeah, I'm with you 100%, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, if people are listening right now and they want to test themselves, I think the interview process at Recogni will give you a good test. But good, man. Look, I think just to wrap it up, 10 years it's such a long time, right? Maybe this is a bit of a shit question, but maybe let's do 5 years. Like, how do you see what you're doing at Recogni kind of expand over the next 5 years? And where do you see yourself in that 5 year period? Like, do you think you would have solved level 5 autonomy, or what are you expecting?
I think, God, that's a really hard question. I can only answer a part of that, I think. I assume that, let's say, neural network architectural changes, or maybe the solution is not fully a neural network, but some form of software are needed, innovations in that field, to get to a level of functionality that can deliver level 5 autonomy. I assume that is still needed. I do not think that with the current methodologies we can just do more of the same to get there. But under that premise, or in that context, there's always the question of, where do I execute this? On which processor? On which platform? Right? I have written down the math in my code now. This is the numbers you need to multiply and add up to get to level 5 results. But who now computes that? Because I'm not going to compute that in my head. I need a processor and a compute platform, like a board and network and memory for that. So who builds that? And I think that will be the role of Recogni and what we can bring to the market. Really understand the essence of the mathematical operations that defines the nature of that solution I think will have crystallized until then, and understand and find the most effective way to put that into silicon, into hardware. I think this is where no other company is as good as we are, to really bring those two worlds in the most optimal way together. And that kind of goes back to, the question I mentioned earlier, the point about the chain of people who communicate the need. And if that's too long, then you just fail. There's so much lost in translation. And I think this is what the incumbents have. They have many silos of you're the chip team, you're the memory team, you're the whatever team, and you're the autonomous driving team. And they're just too far apart to really talk to each other. And they might find a 90% optimal solution in silicon, but it's only going to be 30% optimal for the software. Or there are companies that only do software that find a 80% optimal solution that runs really good on hardware, but you could have built much better hardware for that. So what we, I think, will be able to do is like not 90%, but maybe 80-80. And with that, we're ways ahead of anyone, because it's no car out there will be driven by a chip. No car out there will be driven by software. They will be driven by software on a chip. So you need to design both in the best way possible. And I think only Tesla has been able to do that right now. They had a small team. They sat down. We need this, so we built that. And we can do the same, but I think few others can do that. So I think this is the role that Recogni will play in the next 5 years.
I'm looking forward to seeing that, man. I'm obviously going to be following your journey quite closely. So honestly, dude, I wish you all the best, obviously. And Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down and talk to you for an hour, dude. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your insight and thoughts on stuff. And it was a pleasure, man.
Thanks, Luke. Likewise, it's always a pleasure to talk to you too. And I think the take you have on letting people that look for a job understand what the market does and really empowering to find the best position for them. That's awesome. You're really kind of an advocate for job seekers, employees. That's really great.
Thank you so much, man. I'm going to use that little part as a marketing snippet.